Hi and welcome to Connecting Is Not Enough, the networking radio show. I'm Andy Lopata. In this episode I'll be sharing the same mix of networking tips, interviews and new music as last time out. Thank you so much for all of the positive feedback on the first episode a few weeks ago. I hope that today's edition is equally enjoyable. Over the next 20 minutes or so I'll be discussing how you can choose the right networks for you to join, sharing extracts from an interview I recently did for Carol Dodsley, the how-to girl, and interviewing personal branding and reputation management expert Lesley Everett about how to manage your network's perception of you. I'll also be playing some music from Swedish chanteuse Klara and finishing with the wise words of the Dalai Lama. I'm regularly asked how people can select the best networking groups or online networks for them. Faced with an array of opportunities, many people settle just for the ones they're invited to, and that often fails to lead to a successful result. Networks, whether online or face-to-face, can offer you a range of benefits, but you need to be focused on the right one for you. Set yourself an initial goal and focus your attention on what you need to do to generate that return. As you start to reap the rewards, you can start to look to see how else you can benefit from your membership. Networks can help you become better known, better equipped, or better connected. So understand what your primary goal is and make sure that you focus on finding the right networks which will help you achieve it. So look at a networking group or look at a networking site and say, how will this help me build my profile? And will that be with the right people in the right environment, the right sector, the right industry, whatever it might be? How will this network give me the knowledge I need, provide self-development opportunities, or just give me peer group support in the way that I need it? Or if you're looking to become better connected, how will I be able to build the trust and the relationships and the understanding with people in this network that will help me get the referrals I need? If you understand what you want from a network, you understand your primary goal, you can then take the actions that will take you towards achieving those objectives. But if you just go to the group you're invited to, if you just join for the sake of it without thinking what you want to achieve, you'll get very different results entirely. I was recently interviewed by Carol Dodsley, the how-to girl, live on Google Plus and on YouTube, more about what we've just been talking about, networking strategy, the pitfalls of the wrong approaches and how to select the right groups for you. The full interview is available on YouTube, on my channel. It's also available in the online edition of Connecting Is Not Enough, the e-zine. But in the meantime, just to whet your appetite, here's a couple of extracts from my interview with Carol.
And that's sort of, when you're talking about it in that way, it turns LinkedIn into something completely different to what a lot of people see LinkedIn as. They just see it as another site where we post our links and we have a few chats in a group, which can be very powerful, chatting in groups. You know, I've made a lot of connections, referrals and clients through chatting in groups, but it really does start to sort of make people realize it's this networking thing that we all call is not just about meeting people and throwing your business card or your website links, depending whether it's on or offline. It is so much bigger, but it's also so much more powerful. And when you really understand it, it's actually not that difficult, is it?
And that's where we come back to the idea of a strategy. If you break these things down into practical steps and say, what do I want to achieve? What do I need to do to get there? It becomes easy. And I remember when online networking first came around with the Academy in the UK back in '98. And I think probably the website for Academy, the actual social network online was probably around 2000, 2001. And it was just, the site was so complicated for people, they didn't know where to start. If you look at LinkedIn now, which menu do you go to? What do you do first? If you break it down to simple goals, simple objectives, and then say, what do I have to do to achieve that objective? You focus on that and don't worry about the rest till you're comfortable. So you mentioned groups. You know, when I talk about LinkedIn, I don't tend to talk about groups purely because I'm focusing people on the referral aspect. The groups tends to come under either, for me, better known, better equipped. So you can use groups to raise your profile in an industry sector. You can use groups to find out what a market is thinking or what decision makers are thinking, or to ask for solutions to questions. Very, very useful. But if I start piling all of that into, here's how you use LinkedIn, you can do this, you can do that, you can do the other. You know, one of my favorite phrases I've heard in recent years is, the more you give me to remember, the more I've got to forget.
When they go to face, you know, the offline network events, they always have their 60 seconds stand up and say who you are and what you do, and it terrifies a lot of people. Or they just stand up and go, I'm an electrician, and if you need anything doing, let me know, I'm Bob Booths, you know. And then to get into that, because to get into the story part, somebody has to be wanting you to tell them more. It's not that initial what you do, the story part. Otherwise, you know, people, it's like, well, I only asked what you did. I didn't, ooh. You know, how do people actually start? Because there's all these, you know, people are out there saying you have to have a wow factor sentence. You have to be able to say something that people will then say, well, how do you do that? You know, there's so much that people are being thrown at them. How do they really get this right?
I think the second suggestion you made is one that I've used in the past, and I agree with. If you start that conversation, you've heard of open and closed questions where people can just answer yes or no. You want an open response that begs a question in return, because you want to get into a conversation. But actually, my advice is wait till you've built the relationship and people really want to know, and they'll pry, they'll find out. Don't panic and think, I have to get my elevator pitch across. And this whole idea of wow sentences and so on is cliched, and they sound cliched 9 times out of 10 when people say them. When you have your 60-second presentation at a networking group, that's something different. If it is something like a Chamber of Commerce, where it may be a one-off, you do need a 30 seconds or 60 seconds, whatever it is, statement that gets people interested, that is probably quite general. But it does need to get people to want to come and talk to you afterwards. And I would suggest that telling a high-impact story of how you've recently worked with someone would help with that. What I often do in a situation where I am trying to explain what I do is I go over what I've been doing over the last week. You know, the different clients that I've worked with, if I'm going to be general, because it gives people an overview and it's more real than you know, in theory I do this and in theory I do that. However, if I'm in a one-to-one conversation, because I work with different industries and for different reasons around networking. So it might be referral generation, it might be helping people find a job, it may be helping women within a corporate use networks effectively to progress their careers. So I'll look at someone and say, well, they're in a corporate environment, or they're an entrepreneur, or they're in a sales team, and then I will give them the response that's suited to their understanding and their situation, and that's going to engage them more, and it's also going to be more relevant to the people they know. If you're doing that 60 seconds in a referral group where you're doing it every week, you should be asking for referrals, because you should have already built the platform in the early days of your membership of trust and credibility, where you may just be giving a general overview, but then you say, I'd like to meet someone from this company, they have this problem, and I know that because I've worked with someone in the same industry who's had the same problem, and this is what we did to help them. But by then you're equipping your champions to go and talk about you to the people you want to meet. So that's a different scenario.
I hope you enjoyed those extracts from my interview with Carol. As I mentioned, if you want to hear the full interview, it's available on my YouTube channel, or also if you get the Connecting Is Not Enough easing through your email, you can find it there. Continuing the interview theme, I'd like to share with you a recent conversation I had with a good friend of mine, Lesley Everett. Lesley is world renowned as an expert on reputation management and on personal branding, and we spoke about the importance of understanding how your network perceives you, and how that compares to exactly what you want it to be. Anyway, here's my interview with Lesley. So if you've read Recommended or you've been on one of my workshops, you may well have heard me mention Lesley Everett before. Lesley is the author of a fantastic book called Walking Tall, and a speaker on personal branding. And one of the things I recommend in the book, and I've talked about in many events and workshops, is the importance of managing your personal profile and understanding what you want people to say about you when you're not in the room. So one of the exercises I ask people to do is based on something that Lesley recommends, which is asking people what they think about you and what they say about you and what they know about you, which a lot of people find frightening. So people get put off by that, Lesley. Why is it so important?
Well, how we think we come across is very often very different to how other people perceive us. And unless we know how other people perceive us, we don't know how our brand is rippling out there. Everything people say about us ripples out to other people. We don't know how far. We don't know exactly what they say. And if we're creating confusing messages because we're not consistent with our brand, then we make it quite difficult for people to talk about us and recommend us in the right way. So we've got to take more control over what those perceptions actually are and think about what do I want, what do I bring to the table, what do I want to be known for, what's my legacy, what do I want to be famous for, and then we do everything that we can consistently in every form of communication to reinforce those messages about us. And then gradually what ripples out is a consistent brand message, and people talk about us in a way that we're much more in control of. And fact is today, unless we're visible, unless people remember us, unless people talk about us, we're never going to get to where we want to be and reach our goals in life. And that includes social media today as well. We have a reputation that builds outside of just face-to-face or voice-to-voice communication. People talk about us on social media, especially as speakers. If we have a profile, people talk about us on Twitter all the time. We've just got to manage as much as we possibly can what those perceptions are, and then we're managing our brand more effectively.
Okay, so some people might think, well, this is fine if you have a brand. You know, if you run your own company or are selling a business or a product or a service. But surely this is equally relevant for people who work in a corporate environment for their own career. So how would different people in different scenarios take your advice and use it in the best way for them?
Yeah, absolutely. I get your point. All of my work now pretty much is with big global organisations and with senior people or middle management up to boards of directors. And what I always tell people is you need to manage your career more like an entrepreneur than ever before. You've got to be visible. There was a survey a research study that Ellery Sampson did in her book called The Image Factor. And she looked at what are the 3 biggest factors in career progression today. And she found that it was only 10% down to doing your job well. Now, we know it's no longer good enough just to do a good job. If we don't do a good job, we're going to be out anyway. We've got to be recognised for what we do, and we've got to make sure people know what it is we're specifically good at, no longer good enough just to do that good job. 30% is down to attitude and behaviour when you do your job. So this is how you project your brand, how people perceive you, what your attitude is to what you do, your whole brand packaging, if you like. And then 60% is down to visibility and exposure. So it's a 90% thing. If we're not managing that 90%, our brand and how we are visible and how we get exposure with that, then it's no longer good enough to get us to where we want to be with our career goals and business goals. So this is becoming more and more important to senior executives today. Businesses need personalities behind them. People aren't prepared to do business with companies anymore that don't have a personality, that they don't know who it is behind. They don't know a bit about the CEO and the executive team. So it's becoming more and more important. I'm busier than ever working with people at that level to get their brand, their profile, their personality out there in line with what the corporation is trying to do.
Okay, so one last question. Do you recommend in that case to your executive clients within big corporates that they blog, that they tweet, and how should they engage with social media?
Yes, I do. I mean, obviously every company has a social media policy, so there are guidelines of what they are allowed to do. But most companies, I find now, want the executive team to have a presence on social media, have the LinkedIn profile there, but to tweet and have their own blogs, get their own individual comments out there in social media within the guidelines of what's needed. So I do encourage them to do that. I encourage them to have a blog. I even encourage them to write a book if they can, because everybody has a story, and that when you get to that level particularly, there is always a thread of information that will help people in saying in being successful themselves. So the work I do with executives is to get them to drill down into what it is they really do that makes them successful today. And if we can really pinpoint that, which often people can't pinpoint on their own, then we can make sure that that message is out there, and that's the message they can share on social media.
That's brilliant. Thank you very much, Lesley.
Thank you very much, Andy.
Some great advice as ever from Lesley Everett, and do please take the time to think about what you want that brand to be, what you want others to say about you
when you're not in the room, and maybe find out whether what people do perceive and what people are saying matches that expectation. It's time for a break from the networking tips now and discussion and a little bit of music. This is someone that I have met through my network, a young Swedish singer by the name of Klara, and the song is Give It Back to Me. That was Klara with Give It Back to Me, and if you enjoyed that, Klara is playing at the famous Ronnie Scott's bar in Soho in London on the 20th of December in the Upstairs Bar. So if you can get along, please go along, support Klara. There are 4 other bands playing, and hopefully I may see you there as well. Back in 1999, as businesses were contemplating the forthcoming change of the millennium, a member of Business Referral Exchange in Croydon, Peter Baxter Derrington, gave a presentation to his networking group about how small businesses could compete in the coming years. One phrase he used stuck in my mind, and I've used it ever since. Pursue the relationship, not the sale. Over the last 13 years, nothing has changed. Pursuing the relationship and not the sale has become something of a mantra for me. I featured it as one of my key tools in And Death Came Third, and have shared it with clients across the world ever since. If anything, it's become even more important over the last few years, as business reputations have been destroyed and the global economy has seen continual upheaval and shifts in power. I recently spoke at a conference for the leading British boarding schools. The conference chair told me beforehand that she saw 2 major themes for the day. and the main one was the importance of relationships. This talk was sandwiched between two speeches I gave for a leading global financial services company, and yet again the theme of relationships dominated discussion throughout both presentations. So it will come as no surprise that a recent newsletter from a colleague of mine, Lee Jackson, resonated particularly strongly with me. In his newsletter, Lee recounted the opportunity he had earlier this year to meet the Dalai Lama and to ask him one question. Lee chose to ask the celebrated Tibetan spiritual leader, what advice would you give to people living in the 21st century today? The Dalai Lama replied, the 20th century became a century of bloodshed. That immense bloodshed failed to bring a better or happier world. If we use common sense, we must now find a different approach when we're facing problems. We shouldn't be using violence. He went on to say, the only approach that there is left is dialogue. In order to create dialogue, you should first respect others' rights. Then compromise or reconciliation dialogue can be meaningful. A long time ago, people just thought me, 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 me. Now we should think us. The whole world should be part of us, a part of we. One of the biggest skills in relationship building is the ability to take yourself out of the equation and see things from the other person's perspective. If you can recognise what motivates and resonates with the other party, it's always so much easier to find common ground. Perhaps that's just as important a lesson in life as in business. And it is particularly relevant at the moment given renewed conflict in the Middle East, where the two parties couldn't be further away from reconciling their differences or seeing the world through each other's eyes. Yes, there's a truce there at the moment, but how long will it hold if each party just sees it from their own perspective and fails to look from the other person's viewpoint? Whatever happens between nations, we can take control of our own relationships as individuals. When you meet new people, take the time to see things through their eyes and find out how you can help each other, rather than just seeing them as a means to an end. Think we rather than me. I hope you've enjoyed this latest edition of Connecting Is Not Enough, the radio show. If you have done, please do subscribe on iTunes, and please also rate the show on iTunes so that more people can find out about it. In the meantime, thank you very much for your support. Your feedback is always valued, and I hope to see you again in 3 weeks' time.